Life before death, strength before weakness, journey before destination. Let's Talk The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson. So, this book is massive, and it is the first book in a 10-book series, and each book is like 1,000 pages. And this book, The Way of Kings, starts off following a lot of different people, and there are so many pieces that get interwoven into a bigger story. Like, when we say epic fantasy, we mean epic fantasy. Like, it is so good. And it is a massive world. Everything is so weird in this story. Like, the characters are like, their cultures are weird. Um, they have this thing called a safe hand, and it's just a hand, and they have to cover it. Otherwise it's like scandalous. Like, I don't know. The one of the weirdest things that weirds me out, and I mean, it's not a big deal. There, some people, their eyebrows come all the way down, and like they can like put it behind their ear. Like, what? Like, why is that a thing? And so just things like that. So like Brandon Sanderson's world is very much creative. It is so different from our world, yet there are some things that are still very similar. And like in some areas, like the grass like moves so it can like survive, but in like some areas it doesn't. And so like that's part like our world. And they're like, why is the grass not moving? Like, that's weird. And I think it's weird that the grass is moving. But so, storyline. Let's work on that a little bit. So, the way that it starts out is it's a country, and it's like under a king, and it's Galavar. Galinar? Galavar. Yeah, I'm right. And so he's the king, and he's trying to make peace with the people across the way called the Parshendi. Well, they end up having him assassinated, and like this is part one. Like, this is right up front. And so he gets assassinated, and so now our country is at war with the Parshendi. And we have a lot of different, we have too many cooks in the kitchen, you know what I'm saying? Because Galavar's son, Elokar, he gets elevated to king, but they don't really respect him, and he he seems very weak. And so he's got all these advisors and stuff, and like they kind of like manipulate him, and Dalinar is his uncle, and he is trying to protect him and trying to like, hey, this is the way things should be done. We need to tighten up. We're too loose. Our soldiers are undisciplined. But everyone thinks Dalinar is crazy, and so they're not really listening to him. Because if we want to drink in uniform, like, why shouldn't we drink in uniform? Why should we be all buttoned up and together? Why can't we be sloppy and having a good time? But Dalinar follows these things called the codes. And what it means is like, when we're in wartime, we are focused. We are like stoic and humble, and we are paying attention to the fact that we are at war and bad things can happen. We're not going to be taken off guard. We're going to be prepared, and we're going to be ready if we get attacked. And more on that later, because that comes into play. But so with his part of the army, he really focuses on that, and he makes his army and his kids live by that. And everyone thinks that's so weird. And his kids kind of think it's weird. And his son Adolin kind of like pushes back on that. It's like, why? Like, why do I have to do this? Like, nobody else does. It doesn't make any sense. And so they're at war. But it's not, it's a weird kind of war, because so they have like, I don't know what it's called, but it's like, it's almost like, I picture like a desert, and it's got like a bunch of like chasms in it. And so they're across the way, and there are these creatures, chasm fiends, that have like gem hearts in them, and we're battling for these gem hearts. And so like the Parshendi will see the creature, and we'll see the creature, and then we go battle. Instead of us just like going to war until one of us wins, we've been doing this back and forth for 6 years. Okay. And so because of that, Dalinar is like, let's be done. Like, let's finish this. Let's do something different. And everyone kind of thinks he's crazy. So nobody listens to Dalinar. And it doesn't help that he is seeing a bunch of visions and he's having seizures and people think he's crazy. Okay. And another important thing to know about the soldiers is that they have these things called shard plate and shard blades. And what that means is that it's this special kind of armor and a special kind of blades, and they make you stronger. And like you can jump from higher up and not get injured, or you can jump farther, or you can run faster. And as long as like the gems in it are charged. And then they've got these swords, and the sword can disappear and come back. And you're not going to beat a, a soldier with the shard plate and the shard blade. You're just not going to beat them. And if you do beat them, you get their stuff. Okay. And so these things are very, very special in this world. And it's one of like the more magic things that we have in this world throughout this book. There is more magic later with radiance and stuff, but where this is a big setup book, like that is the fantasy portion of it. And so Dalinar is trying to convince them to do things differently, and they're like, no. And so we also have Sadeas's portion of the army. And Sadeas is very different from Dalinar. Sadeas has what he calls these bridge crews, and it's these different sets of men who have like their different crews within his crew. And they carry these massive bridges on their shoulders, sprinting for miles to put them over the chasms so that the soldiers can cross over and fight the Parshendi. And that is their whole job, is they carry these bridges back and forth. But they don't get any armor, they don't get any weapons. Sorry if you heard that. I hit the mic. So they don't get any weapons, they don't get anything, and they just get shot at. And it is a hard time. And so Sadeas has these guys, and so he gets a lot of the shards a lot faster, or well, a lot of the gemstones a lot faster because he's faster, because it's a fast system. Whereas like Dalinar, he uses these things called chols, and I imagine they're like giant creatures that'll pull the bridges, and they're very, very slow. And so Sadeas ends up getting a lot of those gem hearts. And so because of that, he's like high society, right? And also within their society, their eye color is very important. They're called light eyes or dark eyes, and the lighter the eyes, the better. And so if you end up winning one of these shard blades, you become a light eyes. And now you get recognized in society, and you are able to get these higher jobs and things like that. So we're following them. And then we're following this girl, Shallan. And everyone hates Shallan. They give her so much grief. But she's fine. She's not that bad. But so she is one of our perspectives. And she has gone on her own on this voyage across the country to meet Yasna. And Yasna is a scholar. And Shallan tells her, hey, I want to learn from you. I want to be a scholar. All these things. So Yasna takes her on. But Shallan is there to steal this item from Yasna in order to take it home to her families to help her family. So that's her whole goal. That's her whole perspective. And so like they're learning a lot of like the history of stuff, and they're looking into the assassination and stuff and all of these things. So we follow her. People think that she thinks she's funny, and she's not. She's sometimes funny. It just kind of depends on your own humor. But so those are the other two main perspectives. So we also follow Kaladin. And in Kaladin's perspective, we have him as he is in like the present time, but we also have him as a teenager getting his flashbacks. And during his flashbacks, we watch him become learn to be a doctor, and we know that he is a soldier, and he then somehow becomes a slave. And so we're following his story as he battles with that and kind of comes to terms with his place in the world as a Dark Eyes. And then his present day, we're following him as part of these bridge crews. And he is having to fight depression and having to fight the fact that everything is pointless. And how do you find purpose and how do you be a leader when you're just bait? Like, you don't really have a purpose except to take arrows. And so we follow him as he attempts to give his crew a purpose and he attempts to find purpose. And I think that that's all of the things as far as like their each perspectives. That's not too spoilery, because that's just like the setup. Like, it's 1,200 pages. There is so much more to these stories. But I think the last thing before we get into like his writing style and themes and stuff is the Knight's Radiance, because that's the whole concept. And that's the part that in this book you don't really know a whole lot about. We just know that in the beginning, and you'll see this in like the prologue, that's what it's called. It's not an epilogue, prologue. We've got some people who are fighting and then they decide to change courses. And so then fast forward, present day, like we see that as a big betrayal. And so the Knights Radiant are hated. They're not real. They're betrayers, all these things. And so we're slowly discovering what they are. And they're kind of like these, almost like these superheroes. And they're bonded to these like special spren. And spren are, how do you describe it? I mean, I kind of picture it like almost like little tiny like Pac-Man ghost sort of things, but they're a little bit more freeform and they kind of pop up in the world at like crazy times. So like if you're really happy, then they might pop up, or if you're really sad, or if it just rained, then there might be water spren. Like, they're an interesting concept. But so those are kind of dumb. But these ones that get bonded with the Radiance are a lot smarter. And that's about all that we know early on in this book. So I won't go into a whole lot more detail. But like I said, it's a lot, because like that's not even like most of the story. Like that, there's still so many pieces. Like that's just the basic setup for the story. And so with Sanderson, a lot of people complain about his prose. I love his prose. I think that the way he writes is perfect for me because I need it to be very direct. If you're going to talk flowery to me, I'm going to get lost. I have no idea what you're saying. And so I love how he talks, or well, how he writes. And he will add in so many of like the little breadcrumbs, and you will miss some, because 1,200 pages, you're going to miss some breadcrumbs. But they pay off later in the book or in later books. And he does a really, really good job of not surprising you in a way that feels like he tricked you. And I hate stories like that. Like, I hate stories that give you a twist just for the sake of a twist, and there was no way you could have seen it coming. Absolutely hate it. But with his books, he absolutely has breadcrumbs, and you can totally see everything that's coming if you know what to look for. But if you don't know what to look for, you're going to miss so many things. And I think that it's just fantastic. I love Brandon Sanderson's endings. His endings are worth the story. His endings are fantastic. In fact, in his books, I listen to audiobooks and I'm like yelling at the radio, like, oh my gosh, like it is so much fun. I love it. I love the banter with the characters. I love the discussion of classism and how we treat people, and can you really change your stars, and how do we find purpose, and how do we be a leader, and can we trust people after being burned by so many other people. And I just find that to be so fantastic. Like, it's so good, and it's so subtle. Like, he doesn't beat you over the head with a lot of his stuff. I don't feel like, I mean, somebody might disagree, but I feel like it's like the perfect amount. Like, I don't feel beat over the head about stuff. And so I really enjoy it. Okay, so let's talk spoilers because that is the most fun part. And when I first read this book, I told so many people the ending. They were never going to read the books. They don't even read a ton, but like I had to tell them the ending because it just hit me so hard. Oh, so we'll get there. But first, let's start with Adolin and the codes and Dalinar and the codes. And I love the tie-in with the codes because of the fact that he screwed up. He was drunk when his brother got killed, and because he was drunk, he was useless. Absolutely useless during this invasion and assassination. Like, I mean, I don't think that he really could have done anything against Zeth, but he was useless. And so he is trying to overcorrect and not be useless anymore. And so I love Adolin's character arc with that because he is such a petulant child early in the beginning. And he grows and he starts to see the importance of it. And I love that for Adolin because I really like Adolin. A lot of people don't like him. I like Adolin. I don't see anything wrong with Adolin, especially like as they grow, as the book goes on. Like, I love Adolin later on. I think he's precious. I think he's a little bit too much of a playboy early on, but he grows, and so I really like him later. I love when he calls Kaladin Bridge Boy. I think that's so funny. It's so perfect. I just love it. But so let's talk Shallan because I don't have a ton to say about her because I don't really care about her perspective as much. Even rereading it, I think I liked it more the first time I read it, but the second time around, I didn't really care as much. But I will say that I don't know if I'm just stupid or what. I did not catch the breadcrumbs that she was a Knight's Radiant, like already. Like, she was already formed as a Knight's Radiant. Or at least had a shard blade. Like, I did not catch that until this re-listen. Because I don't know what it is. I don't know if I'm just stupid. But as soon as she starts in that scene where she's in her room and she's drawing and she's going into Shadesmar and all those things, and she ends up like creating the blood in the room, I did not realize that she was like reached out her hand and she's like 10 heartbeats. And that's how you get the blade. And I didn't know that. I didn't notice that in the first one. I didn't know that she was a radiant until later when she actually pulled the sword. Like, what? I didn't know. I don't know. And it didn't dawn on me that Yasna could do those things. And like, what? I didn't realize that. So that was the biggest thing, is that I didn't realize that. But I tend to get lost in Shallan's perspective once she starts going to Shadesmar. Like, I don't understand. I get a little bit lost sometimes. So I really need this reread that I'm doing is very much needed before I read Wind and Truth. I will read Wind and Truth. I'm just not there yet. But yeah, so that's the biggest thing for Shallan at this point, is that I didn't know that. And I felt really stupid on this reread because of that. But, you live and learn. And I mean, that's the whole point of a reread, is that you're going to find those things that you didn't see the first time. But so she's got a bunch of secrets, and everyone kind of doesn't like her because of her personality. But I mean, she grew up isolated in a weird home. So I mean, if that's kind of the natural consequence of that, is she's not going to know how to interact with people. And so, I don't know. She doesn't bother me that much. Let's talk a little bit about Kaladin and his whole journey. I love Kaladin. Kaladin is my favorite. Although I really love Rock, and I will share a little bit about Rock because I just love Rock. But Kaladin is, I love Kaladin. I think that the fact that he was able to like pick himself up and come back into the bridge and give himself purpose and start to give them purpose. And I just love those scenes early on when he is trying to train and trying to get them to train and trying to get them to help each other. And that's when I love Rock. And he's like, "You're stupid, but I'll do it." And he just gets on board. And I love his relationship with Rock and Taft. I just think that it's exactly what he needed. He needed to have people in his life who he could trust and he could rely on, and who he could see that he's got support, because he didn't have a lot of that, you know, because he bickered with his dad and he felt like his parents didn't really understand him, and he has all this pressure to protect everybody, and he can't do that alone, and he doesn't realize that he needs extra people until he comes to this bridge crew. And I love his journey. I love how we get a little small pieces as we go through the story. And so you know that something happened to Tien, but you don't really know exactly what. You're pretty sure he died, but you don't know how. You don't know what happened. You don't know how they got there. And I loved that storyline. I thought that it was the perfect way for Kaladin to have become a soldier, but having already decided that he wasn't going to be a soldier, that he was going to follow his dad, he was going to be a doctor. And I think that it was the perfect way to get him to go. And I love the discussion with him of him hating the light eyes and stuff. I do think it's a little bit much, but he's been burned quite a bit, so I can give him a little bit of a pass. But I love how he's able to see that there are some light eyes that are not jerks. Like when Adolin comes to the camp and Adolin um sort of intervenes in that situation. I don't remember all the details. And that's when he calls Kaladin a bridge boy for the first time. And Kaladin is seeing him and he's like, maybe, but no. And so I love that. And I love how stubborn Kaladin is with all of that. And he's so stubborn about how he's got to protect everybody and it's all up to him, and how he slowly allows other people in. I think it's fantastic. I love all of their like strategies to try and get past like the loopholes for them training and them doing the bridge runs differently so that they can survive. I just think that those are so much fun. And I love that they're bonding and they're being intentional about these things. And Kaladin he's precious. And I love his relationship with Syl. Like, I just think that they are so great together, and how she learns and grows with him. And I just, I think she's so precious. Okay, so the biggest thing though is we've got to talk about that final battle. Like, I will give it to Sadeas. I think that he maneuvered this so perfectly. And I will give credit to where credit is due. It was maneuvered perfectly to get Dalinar and Adolin in the exact right spots so that they're out, so that he can turn around and betray them. It was done fantastic. And the fact that Kaladin's group was so slow coming back from this battle, and they could have gotten away. Like, they were leaving, they were getting to safety, and they see this betrayal of Sadeas towards Dalinar, and that Sadeas is pulling out from the army, and Dalinar and Adolin are surrounded, and there's no escape without any of these bridges. And Kaladin is like, oh man, Dalinar protected us one time. we got to go back. Like, we can't not go back. It's the right thing to do. And they debated and they had a hard time with it because, like, they didn't want to do it. And then they were just like, we got to go do it. And the fact that they're like, we will die. This will kill us. There is no coming back from this. We don't have any weapons. We're injured. As soon as we put this bridge on the chasm, all of those Proshendi are going to swarm us and we're going to die. Attempting to save these light eyes who hate us and who we hate, who have done nothing for us, who have just made our lives miserable. And they do it anyways. Oh, I mean, how much courage does that take to know we're going to die, but we have to go do the right thing? And man, when they put that bridge into place, and Kaladin at this point, I forgot that Kaladin at this point he was out of it. Like, he was gone. He was exhausted. He was mentally drained. Like, he was delusional at this point. And he is now a Radiant, and he's learning that he's a Radiant. And in this moment when he's like outside of his mind, he levels up. And now he goes and he like helps his friends with this bridge, and he like takes on all these Proshendi in front of the bridge, and they're protecting the bridge and they're holding the bridge. And then you've got Adolin and Dalinar who are in the middle of this battle, and Adolin's like, I can't leave my dad. And Adolin's soldiers are like, we can't leave without Adolin. And you've got Kaladin who has realized this, and he's like, dudes, y'all need to go. And they're like, no, we can't, not until we get him. And Kaladin like steps up and starts commanding and giving orders and being like a boss in this moment. And they listened to him. There was one scene, he was talking to this soldier, and he was asking like, who's your superior? Like, who's your leader? And he's like, they're all dead, man. And he's like, all right, you've been promoted. Anyone asked, send them to me. And he's like, what? Can you do that? He's like, I just did. Like, go. And so he just starts taking charge. And you can tell, like, he is meant to be a leader. And so they finally get Dalinar and Adolin across the bridge, and they're done. They're safe and they're fine, and they get to go home. And oh man, when we flip to another perspective of them at home, and the soldiers being like, "Oh yeah, there was just too many of them. We had to pull out, or we were all gonna die. We had to leave them behind." And we're in Navani's perspective, and Navani she's the queen. She's the king's mother, so she is the ex-king's wife. So she's the widow. But now she is Dalinar's girlfriend. So she's very invested in this. And so she's noticing, your soldiers don't look like they just went through a battle. Especially if it was like that bad. They don't look like they've been through it. And so she's noticing this. And then she's been told that everybody died. Dalinar died, Adolin died, they all died. So Dalinar's other son, Renarin, he's crying, Navani's crying. They are like grieving. And here comes Dalinar with him and his bridge crew and his soldiers. And at this point, Dalinar has told Kaladin, I will free you. And Kaladin's like, I don't believe you. I don't know that he's going to let us go. But we'll see. We'll try it. Whatever. Kaladin's like, we're probably going to die. Because, like, there's no pretending that we didn't just help you. There's no pretending. But still, they go up to Sadeas and they're like, see, we're alive. And he's trying to bargain for the bridgemen, right? For the bridge crew. And Sadeas is like, no, I'm not going to give them up. I need them too much. And Dalinar gives him the shard blade. He gives him the sword. Like, what? And I'm just like, oh my gosh, this sword is so important. And he gives him the sword for all of his bridgemen. I'm like, that is a sacrifice. Like, and then there's this part earlier in the book where they were talking about how, like, you can use other people's shields and, like, swords and stuff for, like, the duels. And Dalinar had said, I could never give up Oathbringer. I could never even let someone borrow it. And then here he is handing it over for these bridge crews to free them. Because he's like, I owe you a debt. Like, I'm not, no, I'm going to get you. And I'm going to do what I have to. And I will give up the sword if I have to. And he gave up the sword. Like, oh, it brought tears to my eyes the first time I read it. Because I was like, oh my gosh, he did it. And there's no way Sadeas is going to turn that down. I mean, like, how are you going to turn down a shard blade? Like, you don't have one. And, like, that is precious. Like, that is like the ring from Lord of the Rings. Like, my precious. Like, oh, he gave it up. And the fact that he then put Kaladin and his guys as his own personal guard to guard his family, like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. And Kaladin really needed that. Kaladin needed to see that the light eyes could be trusted. At least some of them. Like, they are human. They are not all awful. And so the fact that Kaladin got to see that and got to, like, experience that freedom, oh, because he did the right thing. You know, like, he did the right thing and it paid off. And I love that. Oh, it was so fantastic. And we do have to talk about Dalinar and Elhokar. Like, I had forgotten that in the end of Way of Kings, Dalinar has, like, all of his people who are protecting Elhokar, and he goes into Elhokar's chambers and just, like, attacks him. And is like, if I wanted you dead, I would have done it. Like, I could do it. And he's, like, crying for his guards, and Eleanor's like, they're my men. Like, they're so loyal to me, you can't do anything. And, like, I'm getting chills just talking about it because Dalinar made his point of, like, I am not out to get you. Like, I am here to protect you. And I am, like, one of the only ones who is being honest and who is, like, doing what he's supposed to. And Elhokar's just like, oh my gosh, okay, I give. I'm like, oh, because he's been so paranoid about dying and someone being after him. And Dalinar's like, you did it to yourself. Like, you're the one who has put yourself in these horrible situations in order to get someone to believe that you're being attacked. Like, you faked everything. And Dalinar's like, I'm not having it. It's just so good. I love it. I love seeing him as, like, the Blackthorn. Because we spend so much of the book of him just being like, I don't want to kill people. I don't want to fight. Like, I just don't enjoy it. And then in that moment, you get to be like, that's the Blackthorn. And so, oh, I love it so much. And we didn't even talk about his visions very much, did we? Okay, so we will end there. We'll talk about his visions a little bit because, like, I have a hard time with his visions because I don't know what all's going on. That's why I'm rereading the books just so that I can, like, okay, I'm caught up. But so he's getting these visions during the high storms, and oh, we gotta talk about so many more things to talk about. Okay, hold tight. We're almost done. So he's getting these visions, right? And he doesn't understand what the visions are trying to tell him. And upon reread, like, I can be like, dude, he's not talking about the High Princes. He is talking about uniting the Radiants. You've got to find the Radiants and you've got to unite them. And that's all that I know. That's all that I can get from those so far. But where else was I going? I think that was it for that. Okay, so Kaladin in this high storm. Oh my gosh, like, I was so worried for him when he goes in this high storm. So if you're watching this and you don't fully know what happened, um, Kaladin decided to alter the plan for the bridge cruise, and it caused a lot of chaos at the war front, which caused a lot of the actual soldiers to die because of his changes. So, what they decided to do is they strung him up and during these high storms, and these high storms are like massive, like tornado, hail, high rain, high winds, like massive storms. So they strung him up and they left him outside to die in the storm. And he survived it because he's a radiant. Like, that's the only reason he survived it, is because he's a radiant and he had like the little gemstones. And because stormlight comes from the storms, and it helped him heal. It helped him, But so, and he healed from that within like a couple of weeks. And like, that's kind of how Tef starts to realize, like, hey, there's something going on with you. I think that you're a radiant. But he doesn't tell him for like forever more. Um, but yeah, no, that was, I was terrified for him. Like, you're gonna leave him strung up so that he can die? Oh, that's not fun. And after that, they left him alone for a little bit because what are you gonna do? You tried to kill him. You said, let the let the storm judge him, and the storm judged him and he lived. So, all right, you're forgiven. And so, yeah, I think that that's everything. Yeah, I think that that's everything that I wanted to talk about today. Um, but I know that there's a whole lot more that I didn't even talk about, like wit. I didn't even mention wit at all, and wit is, we should talk about wit. But this video is already long enough, and I don't know a whole lot about him and him being a world hopper and all those things. Like, I am not the person to ask. In fact, if you were hoping for like some sort of real deep dive into all the layers and the Easter eggs, I am not your person. There are hundreds of other videos on here that will do that for you. I am happy just to keep up with the storyline. Okay. So I had fun talking about it. I love Stormlight so much. Words of Radiance is still my favorite, but I liked Way of Kings. I loved Way of Kings. And I don't know if I'll do another one for Words of Radiance. I might, because I really want to talk about that scene. But we will see. Anyways, have you read The Way of Kings? Are you a hater for Adolin? Let me know in the comments, and I will see you in the next one.